what is the purpose of a Dillian Whyte anymore?
Chris Eubank Jr. might have just got to that stage of his career where he's hit the wall. It's done. I get it. It's very sad.
It's a waste of talent. Welcome to Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. This is episode 23. As always, don't forget to keep liking the videos, subscribing to the channels, but more importantly, watching the show. Spencer, nice to see you. We're recovering from an episode with Ben Shalom. No, Ben, you're very good. Not true at all. You all right? Everything okay?
Yeah, very well, very well. Hopefully I'll get to speak a little bit more this week.
Well, it depends who's hoping for that. Not the audience, I suspect.
I'll fill you with knowledge, Simon.
Yes, you do. On those tiny little shot glasses. Where I wanted to start, where I think we should start this week, is talking about the landscape. Obviously, Josh Buatsi's fighting on the weekend, and we'll get to that in a moment. And of course, Canelo Alvarez is fighting as well. There's some big fights coming up on the horizon. But I wanted to talk to you, and wanted us to talk about the heavyweight scene and how it looks and the landscape of this year. Because it feels like it's a bit fraught with disappointments. I wanted to see how you saw it, because it's the marquee division, and whether we like it or not, it's the one that most people are attracted to, and everything spins off it.
Yep.
And what we've seen is a series of no fights being made when we thought they were going to be made, people fighting in fights that aren't particularly compelling, and outcomes like Joyce that were disappointing. So if you're the British public, and you're thinking of the heavyweight scene, what are you thinking at this moment in time?
Frustration for me. I think that we've been promised these big fights now. That's part of probably 3 years, the undisputed fight that keeps falling through for whatever reason. And fights just not materialising the way that they're meant to be. It is frustrating. Politics getting in the way. I think with the Saudis getting involved in these big fights as well, the fighters...
Isn't the biggest culprit, Spence, Tyson Fury? Because we can't levy that too much against... I mean, we can pick through the fight with Jermaine Franklin that anthonyjoshua had and say, why is he fighting him? Why didn't he fight Dillian Whyte straight out of the gate? But we can also make a case for him getting a tune-up fight.
Yep.
Prior to that, he's fought Alexander Usyk twice. Right, when we get into Tyson Fury, irrespective of whether Dillian Whyte was the mandatory, the next fight being Derek Chisora, and then the loss of the Saudi fight, however that manifested itself, the unification fight with Usyk, we have to levy this claim a little bit at Tyson Fury, don't we?
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. I think that, we saw a post from Tyson Fury just, was it last week, the week before, saying, big news coming, imminent, you're going to get a big fight, big news, and we're not getting it. I think that's the frustration for the public, that they keep getting these false promises, and we're not getting the fights that we need. We need to see these big fights happen. We want to see Joshua versus Wilder. We want to see Fury versus Usyk. They are the fights that we need. We want to see Joshua versus Fury. The best box the best. That's how you get great eras of boxing. You go back to the Muhammad Ali days, Simon. They all fought each other.
Fraser,
2 or 3
Foreman,
times. Fraser, Foreman,
Sonny Liston, whoever
all
else.
of those. So that's what we need. For these guys now to really kick on. They're all getting into the twilight of their careers as well. So these fights have to happen now, and it's just in a frustrating time. I think it has been for a couple of years.
What do you think goes through Tyson Fury's head? Because is he impervious in terms of not aware of what people will say every time, to coin the producer's expression, every time he gives it the big one about something, it doesn't seem to manifest itself. Do you not think this lands in the orbit of Tyson Fury, where he makes these observations a couple of weeks ago about, wait and see, big news coming, and then 2 weeks later, nothing comes? I mean... What do you think? Does it resonate with these guys, or are they just in a bubble, don't care, and ultimately background noise isn't part? Because the boxing fans are very different to other sports fans, aren't they? They're very, very analytical. They're very critical. They're very judgmental. And I know all that goes with other sports as well, but they're real purists. And I often get pelters for some of the knowledge that I don't have. And they go after me for saying, "Oh, you're a casual in a position of influence that you possibly shouldn't be." And you can say what you want. That's your view. But there's this people like Fury lose credibility or care about losing credibility, do you think?
With the boxing fans,
with this
definitely.
Nonsense?
With the boxing fans, definitely. Because, if someone says something, what it's like with the boxing fans. If someone says something, they want to see it. They want it. So if Fury's saying big news coming soon, and they don't get that news, they get frustrated, and it works. It'll work against Fury in the end. He's the number 1 heavyweight out there right now. He's the guy that can make these fights happen. And seems to be the guy that's stalling everything happening at the moment. And I think that is the frustration. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, look, I think the reality of it is you only get so many fights, and you only get so many people that you're prepared to fight when you've got bigger opportunities down the line. The big frustration is that the fights that we want to see often come at a cost implication that most people in the world can't put on. So then you're beholden to one part of the world, the Middle East, and when they're ready to go and when they're ready to do something. So I do understand some of the explanation about some of these fights not being made. And when we hear about the Saudi situation with Fury, and then you hear other arguments that have been advanced by people in the Fury camp and around the Fury promotion side of things, saying that the Saudi deal was never there. It wasn't a firm thing. They would have been prepared maybe to stand down from other fights. Maybe Chisora would have been stood down. Maybe other things would have been done if there was a legitimate offer from the Saudis. But when you've got a situation where no one's fighting, Joshua's come back, inauspicious performance, talking about fighting in December. That's no good. When you're talking about Fury and a fight that needs to happen after the Chisora, because Chisora was what it was, right? Derek goes and gets a payday. Chapeau, well done to Derek. Fantastic, right? He deserves it. But the boxing fans want to see Tyson Fury being tested.
Absolutely.
So the next fight that we heard was Ruiz.
Yep.
If that is going to happen, because clearly they're going to fight. He's going to fight someone in July.
Yeah.
And the two names that are now banding about are Andy Ruiz, which is where I was led to believe it was going to go.
Yeah.
And probably it'll end up there.
Yeah.
Right? Or Zhilei Zhang.
Yeah.
What do you make to either one of those fights?
I think the more likely opponent is Andy Ruiz. I think he's a decent opponent. I think he's stripped down his weight, and I think he can give Fury, like, stylistically, he's made for Fury. He's made for Fury to look good because he's slow, he's ploddy, he's got quick hands, but he's slow with his feet, and we know Fury likes to utilise the ring and whatnot. So I think it's a perfect fight for Fury at this stage, and an acceptable one, I would say.
Ruiz.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he's recovered some ground, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Because it was, I mean, the rematch against AnthonyJoshua, I know, because I knew what condition he was going to be in, because one of the jewellery companies that sponsored him, the owner of the jewellery company, told me that we've had Andy Ruiz in getting some jewellery, and he could barely get through the door. So I kind of knew that he was going to go in like the Pillsbury Doughboy. But since then, he's obviously got himself together, had some good wins.
Yeah.
It's still a fight that you would fully expect Tyson Fury to come out of.
Do you know what the problem we've got right now is? That because we've been promised these fights, now this Saudi situation's been talked about with the four fighters, the four top heavyweights out there. So the problem we've got now is the public won't accept any other fight. That's the thing. You mentioned Ruiz, and you go, well, they'll accept it if there's this tournament going on in the fall, because they've been full of false promises the whole time about these fights that are happening and haven't manifested themselves.
I mean, the public will accept within reason what looks reasonable for them to be given. If you've got Tyson Fury fighting Andy Ruiz, and there's on the card that the public understand, as much as we may not like it, because we are part of the public. I don't like the fact that all the roads have got to lead to Saudi because the fighters have got to be paid a certain amount of money. But I accept it now. It's part of the ecosystem.
Have you heard anything on that, by the way? Like, with this Saudi, what's the latest update?
Well, again, you start hearing about the distribution deals and how you would buy AnthonyJoshua out of DAZN, or how you do a dual broadcast deal, or how maybe the Saudis would cut it. What I've been hearing in the loosest of terms is the cut, £200 million fight, £90 million to Fury, 50 million to Usyk, and 30 million each for the two other fighters, which are Joshua and Wilder. And that was an interesting piece of understanding that I got from that, because I think to myself, does Joshua accept 30 million? Does Wilder Wilder accept 30 million because he's never been paid anything like that?
Yeah.
But really making Fury the £90 million fighter, then making Usyk the £50 million fighter. And by the way,
who's making those decisions? Like what I'm saying,
the value of the deals.
The value of the deals.
Who are the two champions?
Yeah.
Who are the two A sides? Who are the two people that are going to bring the perceived numbers to the Saudis to make it interesting for them to do? And then it becomes a carve up. And we all know, we've seen it, and we know it to be the case, and whether they protest it or not is a different matter, that these guys expect to get paid the value side. So Fury's got a sense of value in himself, an innate sense of value, and he will take it as a point of principle rather than a point of necessity. Because ultimately, if there's going to be X amount of money on the table, I want the bulk of it.
So the rumours are obviously that Fury is the one stalling this competition from happening right now. So all the other fighters, from what my understanding, have agreed the terms, and they want this to happen. And it's Fury that's the one that's not decided anything at the moment.
I don't suppose, for want of a better expression, and not to fall into the camp that everything Frank Warren's camp do, apparently I advocate for. But if Fury wants the most money, he's going to be the person most difficult to deal with. And so that means that the negotiations will be more complicated. And if it's cut the way I'm suggesting, I've been suggested it may well be cut.
Yeah.
90 million for Fury, 50 million to Usyk, 30 million to Wilder, 30 million to Joshua. And then you have the amalgamation fight where all the bets are off and they'll start again.
Yeah.
Then I don't see that Fury would be someone stalling it or someone stopping it.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think that anyone really genuinely thinks, besides people that are in rabid camps, people that are in the Joshua camp, people that are in the Fury camp, that turn around and say, Fury's always the one that breaks fights, Fury's always the one that does this, Fury's always the one, he doesn't want to fight anybody. I don't think that's true. I think Fury will fight anybody, because I think he believes he can beat them all, but only explicitly on his terms.
Sure.
And there's something to be said for that. There's also something to be said against it, because if you're only doing something on your terms, then it makes it very difficult for other people to do deals with you. That kind of, in some respect, establishes some of their value, which is the argument that I think Usyk made. What about Joyce? I mean, I'm hearing. I mean, have you heard this? That he's taken up the rematch clause.
Absolutely.
I'm saying.
Yep. He's activated the rematch clause.
I think that's a terrible decision.
We both said the same. You know, you look at fighters and styles and whatnot, and you just think, you know what? You don't need to go there again, Joe. You're not going to. There's no value in you going there again. You can go and rebuild. This is, you know, I know a lot of people have been making comments. You read the comments, say, well, he's 37, 38 years of age. You know, he can't go and rebuild. Why can't he? Of course he can. Why can't he go and rebuild? He can go and have 2 fights, rebuild, and put himself back in the mix.
People will say that we are hypocritical, specifically me, when I didn't advocate for him fighting necessarily Usyk again, because I thought the outcome would be the same, but I felt that he had to.
Yeah.
Anthony Joshua.
Yeah.
But Anthony Joshua, and people saying, well, hang on a second, how is it that you suggest that Joyce can duck Zhang in a rematch and still give him credibility, but you wouldn't advocate for Anthony Joshua to duck it? Well, Anthony Joshua was the heavyweight champion of the world, and Joyce isn't.
Yep.
And so with that in mind, if I'm Joyce and I want to get an opportunity to be heavyweight champion of the world, or vaguely something close to it so I can get paid, I'm going to duck Zhang.
Yeah,
I've had him beating. And maybe I'll get to him another day.
Listen,
maybe I'll go win a world title and get to him another day.
It's a business, you know, and I don't think that is a sensible business move. I would have took him a different route, but he has activated it. It's going to be interesting, especially if he has to go over to China to do it as well.
Well, it'd be interesting if there is any genuity in Zhang fighting Tyson Fury, because that would mean that Joyce gets paid some step-aside money, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So there's the business angle of things.
Yeah.
So you pull all these things. What about Daniel Dubois?
Daniel Dubois goes in with Alexander Usyk next. I think that's a fight that happens. I think we see that. Look, I think Alexander Usyk fights this summer. I think that Tyson Fury fights this summer. Who else have we got? Deontay Wilder will probably get out again. The only one that we don't know at the moment is Anthony Joshua, because he was talking about fighting in 8 to 12 weeks, and then he says, we've seen him recently in videos online saying, December, Wilder, it's happening, it's on. So
he needs a fight. He cannot.
100%.
Seriously, if Anthony Joshua genuinely wants to be a world champion again, and doesn't necessarily want to get paid like one, which he will do now, he has to have another fight after Franklin, doesn't he?
I agree.
Otherwise, he's not prepared.
I agree.
For the
Listen.
level.
What we was hoping for when he boxed Franklin was that we were going to see this new, reinvented, revived Anthony Joshua, the guy that, you know, once fought with that rawness, and we was going to see the punch combinations back in it. And we didn't see it. And so it tells you he's still not ready to go have a break until December and go again. We need to see some more improvements. There's still stuff that he needs to add into it. So, of course, why wouldn't you fight again in the summer? That would be the sensible move, especially if all the other guys are boxing, because otherwise it's going to lose ground.
Well, of course. And given the fact you haven't fought that much, and the only fights you've had have been 2 defeats and a sort of patchy victory, albeit you won the fight. No one debates you won the fight.
There was no fireworks there. We need to see more.
Chisora versus White again? That's on the offing again, isn't it?
Yeah. Do we need to see that again? No. I mean, they're great fights. Don't get me wrong. They were good fights. You can't say that.
But where is Dillian in this great scheme of things? Because he was making this big argument the other day, and I saw him. He was not particularly pleasant towards Martin Bakole while you guys out in Poland, and that's fine. That's all trash talking. But I think he took it beyond the level, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But Dillian talks about where he is on the great scheme of things and where he should be included in the top 8 of the world. Yeah, and in terms of this competition that he would like to have in Saudi, in his little dreamland where he thinks 8 people are going to fight in that competition, right? But I can't find a space for for Dillian Whyte, because I kind of feel like this is a conversation that I shouldn't have, but I'm going to say it. What is the purpose of a Dillian Whyte anymore? Because he stepped into, he got his world title shot against Tyson Fury, and it was men against boys, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
It's easy for me to say I haven't got to do any of this, so I get that, right? But the point is
was
that
a
we're talking about
one-sided
fighters.
beatdown. Yeah, it was a one-sided beatdown, and like you say, that was his moment, and he needed to produce, it needed to deliver, didn't deliver, and I mean, you're right in what you say when you talk about, like, you know, you talk about the world. You got like people like Frankie Sanchez. You've got like Filip Hrgovic. You know, you got good fighters coming through. Like Joyce is still up there. He's still ranked. So where does he position himself? He needs to now, Dillian Whyte. He needs to roll the dice and just throw everything in and say, give me the biggest name that I can get and try and it's make or break. Well, that's where you're at.
I mean, I would prefer to see him in against Dubois. I know Dubois will necessarily fight Usyk, so that opportunity may escape him. But I'd prefer him to fight Hrgovic or Frank Sanchez or someone that says that Dillian Whyte is worthy of talking about in commercial terms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or Zhilei Zhang.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because that's going over old ground with Chisora. Chisora's the guy now that boxes one of those guys or whatever. That sort of makes sense when they're looking at, you know, like tune-up fights before they go into big fights or whatever. Chisora's that guy. So Dillian boxing him, you go, you're not making any ground up, mate. You need a big name. You know, like, I don't think the appetite will be there.
Well, I mean, look, appetite from who? For him or from the people?
From the public. Yeah.
Well, he's a popular fighter, Dillian Whyte.
Oh, so is Derek Chisora. But what I'm saying is they've seen it a few times and they go, do we want to see it again?
I mean, I know I'm playing both ends against the middle, but people do get an opportunity to redeem themselves. Yeah. People like Dillian Whyte. They admire Dillian Whyte. They felt that after coming back after the Povetkin knockdown and knocking Povetkin out again, or knocking Povetkin out as to redeem himself, was a thing they wanted to see from Dillian. They know that he gave Anthony Joshua some trouble 5, 6, 7 years ago. Everyone accepts that he was schooled by Tyson Fury, but Tyson Fury is going to school a lot of people. So Dillian, despite my vitriol towards his performance against Tyson, which is easy for me to say, he does possibly merit another crack of the whip, but it's got to be proper fights.
Absolutely. Listen, Chisora's a fan favourite, but what I'm saying is putting those two together, I think they've got, that's what I'm saying. I think they've got to go different routes. Okay, right. Well, the moral of the story is, heavyweights, let's get your asses in gear. You're the marquee division, I suppose. Spence, we spoke about it last week, but we're going to speak about it again because there's a lot of takeaways from the conversations that we had with Ben Shalom about Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr., but also, obviously, they've had their press conference now. Yeah.
We've had discussions with Chris Eubank on another show that we do with Jim White. This is a fascinating fight for from another number of perspectives. One of the things that I can't get my head around to start this section off with is the bookies are making Eubank Jr. potential favourite again. And somewhere along the line, Chris Eubank, who I'm genuinely beginning to warm to, by the way, because I think he's so smart, and I have to admire the way he's marketed himself. Somewhere along the line, he's convinced, it's a bit like the devil convinced people that he didn't exist. Eubank has convinced everybody that he's a world champion in the making, and that he's an elite fighter. Yet, every time he steps in against a world champion, and even if it's a world champion who's a couple of divisions beneath him, he's gotten beat. How is that now the discussion point that suddenly the balance of probability is moved in certain people's mind? The bookies and the perspective is Chris Eubank Jr. goes into this Liam Smith rematch as a favourite. That's
insane. In my book, it's insane when you see how conclusive that last one was. Forget that Eubank was doing quite well until the finish or whatever. It's a 12-round fight, you know. Liam Smith is one of those fighters that just gradually gets better, stronger, and he's got a great boxing IQ. He knows how to work fighters out, and that's what he done with Eubank. Eubank's a great salesman. That's what he is, you know. Even now, like we done the press conference last week, and you're sitting there and you're going, this is not a foregone conclusion, this is like, he's got a shot. And it will be a different fight this time, by the way. I think that Eubank, he went in there thinking he just had to turn up to win. I think that he tactically got it all completely wrong. And I think he underestimated Liam Smith. He will not do that this time.
The big takeaway, you said it, I said it, and people as knowledgeable as you and alongside you that have fought and commented far more on boxing than I have, albeit I've spent my life loving boxing, talked about he's done at 160. 160, he cannot, Eubank cannot, he'll get the same outcome at 160. He needs to go to 167, 168 and fight at that weight, right?
Yeah.
And yet now, that dial seems to have switched. The noise seems to have changed.
Yeah.
And the Eubank hype is coming, because I think it's brilliant, the bait and switch in the press conference. It's a proper bait and switch from, you know, I've underestimated you, to, you know, the fight shouldn't have been stopped, through to what I'm going to do this next time round. And he did absolutely categorically tell us before this fight he didn't need to prep for Liam Smith.
Yeah.
You know, we know that's we know that's all hype,
51%.
right? I can eat Kentucky Fried Chicken. But there's Liam Smith is a world-class fighter, you know, from timing and distance, right?
Yeah.
From that point of view.
Absolutely.
He's got great timing and he's got great distance management.
And
that doesn't
he's got world-class punch power as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So what is it about this fight, besides the preparedness to believe Chris Eubank Jr. that he's got something different to offer?
Yeah.
What is it about? He's still got to come down to a certain weight that we alluded to last time. Is going to make him slightly uncomfortable. And I know that Kalle Sauerland says every fight he comes in at 159. Yeah. Right? So he's used to it. But everybody else at the time walked away and went, he's struggling to get to that now. Yeah. He's struggling to do it. You know, he's struggling to be at any sort of effective level at that sort of weight. And it's seen. And what will happen again when he fights Liam Smith again is the same thing again.
Yeah.
So how do we make a case, or more importantly, you as the fighter, make a case for Chris Eubank Jr. to do anything to Liam Smith that makes it a win for him?
Well, I think that there was a number of factors going into that fight. That's why I think this fight will be different. And I think that with what Eubank Jr. done with the Conor Benn situation and putting his body through what he put himself through, and he still made that weight and whatnot.
Did you make that case? He had to go through 2 fight camps and was disadvantaged by the course of it.
Absolutely, like weight drain, not disadvantage, weight drain, looked terrible. And taking that weight off and then, you know, putting it back on, I don't think the body has time to adjust back to its natural strength and rehydration and whatnot. I think that all played a big factor in that. Not saying that taking anything away from Liam Smith, but I just think that him doing that to his body, punishing his body.
5 months after the event, though, Spence.
Yeah, I know, but I still think that it takes time. I think that he has to hit the weight right. Do I think the weight 160 is a problem? I don't think 160 is a problem. Although he did, like, punch resistance had gone. Simon, we might be in a position here, right, where Chris Eubank Jr. might have just got to that stage of his career where he's hit the wall. It's done, you know, because fighters become old overnight. What we saw there against Liam Smith was a guy that was a shell of his former self. It was a guy that had no punch resistance, a guy that looked like he was caught between styles. You know, he was talking the talk, but he did not walk the walk, that was for sure. And he come undone very, very quickly. You know, if you look at the history of his, you know, I always use George Groves as an example. He went through hell and back in that fight with George Groves and took some incredible punishment. We didn't see any of that. So, yeah, I keep talking about him making that weight and coming back down. But like you say, 5 months is 5 months. And this will tell us this fight. And I think that's the intrigue going into this fight, that there's so many unknowns.
Well, what do you think he's got to do? I mean, I was listening to Mark Tibbs the other day talk about Eubank and talking about the fact he likes to fight short and doesn't fight in distance. He's got long levers and he doesn't use them. Right? In this instance, given the fact that he's been knocked down and legitimately knocked down and legitimately stopped, right, despite his protestations.
Forget that.
And I thought it was a great line, by the way, when he turns around and says, Roy Jones will never bring a towel to a fight again. I thought that was a great line. And that's box office, right? Yeah. But what has he got to do to deal with Liam Smith? Because Liam Smith will go into this fight. Liam Smith said to him, and I believe he means it, that was effing easy. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And I believe he means it now. I believe that, because I thought Liam Smith would win the first fight, but it was an element of me wanting to, because I really like the Smith family, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't see, and neither did anyone else, see Liam Smith knocking him out. From Liam Smith's side of things, I've just asked you how Eubank will win this fight. So obviously answer that question. And then go on, say, how do you think Liam Smith's going to deal with it this time around?
Listen, I think that if it's not broke, don't fix it. Liam Smith's just got to do what he done last time. Liam Smith is very good at counter-punching when under attack. He comes back very quick. Eubank Jr.'s problem was he's nice and loose and he's out and he likes to box at range, but when he gets inside and he lets the shots go, he switches off that split second. That split second is when Liam Smith is going to come straight back, and that's where he got caught first time. I think that for Eubank Jr. to turn this around, he has to stay on, switched on 3 minutes of each round. He can't switch off for a second, because if he does, he'll make him pay. Yeah. Smith will try and draw him into a fight. That's where he's most successful, when he's on the inside. He works well on the inside. Eubank works well from the outside, but on the inside, he becomes a little bit loose, and if he becomes loose again, Smith, you know, he'll punish him the way he did before. So Eubank's got all the changing to do. He's got to go back to the drawing board and work everything out. Smith, you know, it was a perfect game plan he had before, so why change it?
So what do you think then? On that basis, given the fact that you've now evaluated what both of them are going to do, which is Smith will do more of the same, and maybe adapt to the fight if it changes slightly.
Yeah.
Eubank's got to do what he's got to do and do it differently and work harder than he does, and be natural at the weight and more comfortable at the weight, in terms of not having two camps being shredded down to get to that point. It leads to the inevitable conclusion who wins the fight, or an inevitable summation of who wins the fight.
Liam Smith wins the fight on points.
Really?
Yeah. Eubank does better this time, and I think he'll do a lot better this time, but Smith wins the fight on points. I think he wins it quite wide as well, yeah.
Yeah. So does
he does it quite wide.
Does that then mean, because one of the questions, or one of the subjects we're going to talk about is Conor Benn, and Chris Eubank referred to the Conor Benn situation.
Yeah.
And talked about it, and talked about the fact that he stepped away from that fight. And I think the rumours abound that, or I know the case to be, that the money that he's getting for the Smith fight is a fraction of what he could have got for the Benn fight. Albeit, if he'd have gone and fought Benn, I'm not sure Benn, the Saudis would have sanctioned it, even though there's a suggestion they might. Yeah. And Eubank would have taken his reputation and put it, because the British Boxing Board of Control would have said, we're not going to sanction this fight, we're going to take your licence away. Yeah. And Chris Eubank would have been looked at very differently than perhaps he's looked at now, because he's been looked at as the victim of the Conor Benn situation. He's been looked at as someone that can sell, not sand to Arabs, but can ultimately sell ice to Eskimos in terms of making people believe that he's a world champion, when we've yet to see that of him. If he loses to Liam Smith, and don't just say, depends how he loses, but if he loses to Liam Smith, he's done, isn't he? That's it. End of discussion. Finished. No more. I'll
tell you exactly where he goes. If he loses to Liam Smith, he'll chase that fight with Conor Benn. That's where he'll go. Because like you just said there, Simon, that's the big payday for him as well. Like I think, and Chris keps talking about it. He talks about it in the press conference.
He's not going to get it, is he?
Well, he'll get the fight with Conor Benn. He'll still get that.
How's he going to get it?
No, that's what I'm saying. I think what happened here was, I'll tell you what happened with this fight. I know he reactivated that rematch clause that he had in there. He done that, but at one stage, it looked like Chris Eubank Jr. was going to go down that route with Conor Benn. They were going to do it out in the Middle East, and I think just because of all the stuff surrounding it, he's decided, right, there's still the water's still too murky. I've got to wait for the dust to settle a little bit. I'm just going to go in this fight again with Liam Smith. But at the press conference, did you see him at the press conference saying, listen, that fight's always there. It's always going to happen. We're always going to do. He's going to do that fight with Conor Benn. That will happen.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I mean, I don't know how he's going to do it, given the circumstances that surround Conor, and we'll talk about Conor in a moment. Yeah. But the principle of Chris Eubank, let's be clear, I admire the fortitude, because I suppose if they wanted to do it, they could have done it, albeit I'm not sure Conor can do anything right now. I'm not sure he can spar with anybody that's licensed under British Boxing Board of Control, train with anybody, or get promoted by anybody that's licensed under British Board of Boxing Control. So it puts him in a bugger's muddle. But they'd have found a way around it somewhere or another, I suspect. Yeah. But also,
he's over in America at the moment, I believe, sparring with John Ryder.
Is he?
So I believe.
I'd be surprised, because John Ryder's got a British Boxing Board of Control licence, and he's not allowed. Yeah. Is he?
Well, I just read it online somewhere.
Is he? If you're suspended, which Conor is right now, isn't he?
I've not seen him sparring. I just read it online.
Okay, well then...
Interesting.
But am I right that if you are a suspended fighter, no trainer that's got a British Boxing Board of Control licence, that means Tony Sims out of commission. No promoter, that means Eddie Hearn out of commission. And no fighter can spar with you if they've got a British Boxing Board of Control licence.
Correct.
Right? So that puts him in a difficult position to prepare for anything. But the point I was going to make about Chris, alongside the integrity of saying I'll not do that because it's not the right thing to do, I'll fight Liam Smith because I'm the one that wanted the rematch clause in there, so I'll get on with it and take it and the money that goes with it. There was also the fact that the British Boxing Board of Control, who I'm incredibly critical of, actually had some bollocks and turned around and said, straight out of the gates, rule whatever it was, 515 or something, you are not likely to be sanctioned by us to go and fight abroad, and you require our permission to do so. Sure. And Robert Smith said that they would have a problem with it, didn't they?
That's right.
And I think that was all part of the concentrating of one's mind.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's where negotiations broke down.
Look, natural flow through and segue is into Conor, because Conor has been speaking out and about, and I'm going to read you something that he has said to one of the Boxing News this week. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I talk the truth. Could I have dealt with this a lot better? I could have. I have so many regrets about the way I've dealt with this. It came as a shock. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And I was probably making it worse because I'm talking from the heart. I'm opening up. It's hard. I know how it looks, but I'll never hold my hands up and say I cheated when I believe I didn't. What do you take from that? Because I actually, I don't know about you, there's a part of me that believes that he didn't cheat. A big part, a significant part. That somehow or another this has found its way into his system. But that doesn't alter the landscape that Conor's got and the manner in which he's handled the situation.
Right, explain this to me. It was an interesting bit there that you said right at the end there. He said, I believe I didn't cheat. Yeah.
Yeah,
Explain that to me. I mean, the wording of that just sounds strange to me.
Well, you'd say you'd like to think that if someone was completely across their subject matter,
when
say,
I believe I didn't cheat.
I know I didn't cheat. But I think we can discipline our own asses and be analysing semantics, the meaning of words, and say, well, he could have said that and he could have meant that. I'm going to give him a pass and say, I believe I didn't cheat. Because certain people use words very carefully. I'm not sure, with all due respect to Conor Benn, one can make that accusation of him. Yeah. He doesn't use words carefully, otherwise he wouldn't go on that ridiculous Piers Morgan show and say, the British Boxing Board of Control can go do one. And that's the reasons why I won't defend myself in front of them.
I'm analysing it and I'm going, right, what am I looking at here? 2 failed tests, no proof of it. So as far as I'm concerned, guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And that's where we're at with it.
Well, he can't. Words, he can't prove himself innocent. There's the challenge.
Well, this is the point.
There's the challenge. That's why you haven't got a 270-page report that was sat with UCAD anytime soon. That's why the WBC turned around and said the 270-page report is fantastic, but it doesn't prove contamination. By the way, how about your diet?
Yeah,
we'll help you out with that one.
Yeah.
And then Conor threw himself under the bus by taking away the mitigation that he could have used in another space by saying it wasn't eggs and rely on the 270-page report.
Sure.
VADA isn't going to be discredited. It isn't.
Yeah.
So we know that Conor is most likely to either get a 2 or 4 year ban. And it just, to my mind, I don't know what he's trying to achieve now that he couldn't have done previously, because now he seems to be backing up, realising that the way he's approaching things wasn't the ideal thing. And I really do genuinely believe, and it's not because I've got a hard-on for anybody, I do genuinely believe that people like Eddie Hearn and other people around him should have given him better advice.
Yeah.
And it's easy for me to say.
What do you make of that statement, by the way?
I think it's sad. I think he's boxed in a corner. I think he's in a position that he could have gotten to 6 months ago and accepted the reality of a situation and be 6 months further down the line.
I agree.
And maybe waste a year, because ultimately sometimes you're out of the ring for a period of time because you can't make fights, or sometimes you're out of the ring because you've got an injury. In this instance, you're out of the ring because he's made such a hullabaloo of it, because he's gone out there and got some highfalutin lawyers that are designed to position him in such a way that he's going to get out from underneath this, and then forgotten the fact that actually some people have got some substance somewhere. Someone's going to turn around and eventually say, no, that's a problem. Yeah. And I think all the noise around him, all the Eddie Hearns of the world telling people they're going to go legal, and they said that. All the people like that said that they weren't going to stop the fight, the Kelly Sauerlands of the world, they turned around and said, we've got medical advice for our fighter. All of this noise, then provoking, and then suggesting the British Boxing Board of Control have got an agenda. Then talking to other people about the nature of your lawyers and what they're going to do, then trying to go around it with the WBC. All of these things have conspired to bring Conor into a very difficult position.
That's right.
And he needed, even his dad, Nigel, said on Piers Morgan, I don't agree with certain things.
Yeah.
Where are all these people in Conor's life?
Yeah, I get it.
Say to him, man, we're behind the 8 ball here. We need to do something slightly differently here rather than be truculent, belligerent, accuse the world of being against us, manufacture conspiracy theories, and then sit there and then say 6 months later, 7 months later, I wear my heart on my sleeve.
Yeah, I know, I get it. It's very sad.
It's a waste of talent, and I don't know how he's going to square this circle, and I don't know what's going to happen to it, but I do hope. And I
think it's become so high profile. That's the problem that he's got as well, is because of the denial of all the situations and the blaming everybody else, it's sort of blown up.
But in any case, to finally close the subject off on Conor, because he's had so much airtime, and it's not just a case of keep picking up Conor every time out of his mouth, because it will fulfill or perpetuate his own feeling of victim's complex anyway. But if he does get a ban, and that ban starts from March the 15th, because that's when he got suspended.
Sure.
Right? He ain't fighting until at the minimum of March the 15th, 2025, right?
Yeah.
And if Eubank gets beat by Liam Smith, where's Eubank going for 2 years?
I don't think he's around in 2 years, if I'm honest.
So that may well then take that fight off the table. Josh Buatsi's back. I'm a great fan of Josh Buatsi's.
Yeah.
I don't have any view on him changing from DAZN to Sky and all that went with that. And I don't particularly have a view that he ducked Bivol and the notion that he could have had those fights, and that it was because he didn't want to fight Bivol, as Eddie would have alluded to, because he didn't want to sign for more fights. And Eddie's point of view is also relevant. If I'm going to pump money into this fight, I want a return on it.
Yeah, of course.
And the only way I'm going to get a return on it is if he stays for a few more fights. So I'll get both of their arguments. I think the main principle was that DAZN wasn't the output deal that Josh wanted, and he thinks Sky are.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
I bet if Eddie Hearn was still at Sky, he'd have been still with probably Eddie Hearn.
Spoke to Joshua about that, and that's exactly what he said. It doesn't matter what who the promoter was. That's where I was going. It's about the platform, and that's what he wants. He recognises that he's lost a lot of ground. You know, light heavyweight division right now is a very good division. He's well ranked in that. He's a WBA #1. You know, there's Dan Aziz, who's in the same camp now. A fight that could be made.
Well, that's what I wanted to say to you, because I'm a huge fan of his, and this potential of Josh Buatsi's has been referred to as for some time, and obviously he's got significant power. And the fight against Craig Richards, and Craig Richards was a very is a very good fighter.
Very good.
And was someone that we all raved about and felt that Craig, if you'd have just gone in against Dimitri Bivol and believed yourself a little bit more, you'd have got an outcome.
Yeah.
Now everyone thinks Dimitri Bivol is pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas Josh has gone in, beaten Craig Richards. Okay, it's not a a knockout win. It's a unanimous decision win, but it's still a unanimous decision. But a sideways, backwards fight. I mean, the guy that he's fighting, Pavel Stepien, his last fight was against a super middleweight who's 5'9", right?
Yeah.
A bit of a journeyman, and this is who they're pairing Josh with.
I think
it feels like not even a sideways move. It feels like a backwards step.
Well, Josh has been inactive. That's the problem, and I think this is a little bit of an anti-Joshua situation when he boxed Jermaine Franklin. You know, this opponent is there to give him rounds. He's got
when
an
was
IBF.
Last time Josh fought?
I think it was just over a year ago.
Against Craig?
Yeah, right. Just over a year ago. So, so he's in that situation where he needs a credible opponent, IBF #4 ranked fighter, unbeaten in 19 fights, and he will give Josh rounds. And, you know, and that's what Joshua needs. But I think ultimately the game plan, if you look at the landscape over the next 12 months, say, is to get Joshua Buatsi that world title shot, or get him in those big fights, you know, with your Anthony Yards, the fights we want to see, which would be a great fight. Why Bivol and Beterbiev have got all the titles tied up, you know, they're the sort of fights that he'd be looking to make, and I think that's
what I was going to say. I mean, the people want to see him potentially fight Dan Aziz because Dan Aziz is coming up fast, and everyone's got a lot of energy for him, and also he's in the same stable, so it makes it an easier fight to make, right? Yeah. But where do you think? I mean, I would like to see Josh fight Anthony Yarde, because I think that would be an absolute tear up. I think both of them are very interesting and engaging fighters. I think Anthony Yarde is a slightly more exciting fighter, a slightly more vulnerable fighter as well. I mean, I personally think that Anthony Yarde's demolition in the second fight of Lyndon Arthur was one of the most exciting fights. And also his turn up and performance against Artur Beterbiev was a great performance. It's a losing performance, but a great performance. When we talk about Josh, Anthony's gone twice for world titles, right? And come up short both times. The first one, he probably, if he believed himself a little bit more and stepped on the gas, he could have got Kovalev out of there, couldn't he? Yeah,
right? Kovalev 2019, Russia. Right. There was always going to be a tough job, that.
And Beterbiev was, I think, levels.
Yeah.
Well,
do you know what, though? What I saw with that fight there with Beterbiev was that sitting there at ringside, I was seeing that, like, Yarde was giving him problems, like, whereas Beterbiev was like, you could see he had to bite down on his gum shield.
Problems out.
Yeah, but great fighters do that. Like, you know, he rode the storm, and he done it, and it's all about
because Anthony Yarde came into that fight full of belief in himself, full of confidence, and stuck it on Beterbiev. And as you saw the fight go on, and Beterbiev bite down on his gum shield, you also saw him working it out. Yeah, absolutely. Working it out. So going back to the original question, which is Buatsi, this fight. It's Josh. We'll give him this one, shall we?
You got to. Yeah.
We'll give him this one as a warm-up to get himself back in. But after this one, where does he go next? And does, in your opinion, Josh Buatsi win a world title? Well,
I think that Josh Buatsi, does he win a world title? I think that he could, definitely. I think he's 30 years of age. He's got look, Beterbiev is like sort of, what is he, 35, 36 now. He's getting on. Bivol, we don't know where he's going. He's talks of him going down to super middleweight. So I think if the opportunity against those two, it's always going to be difficult. But I think the opportunity will arise, and I think those titles will become vacant at some point.
Does he beat Anthony Yarde?
Great fight. Does he beat Anthony Yarde? Great fight. Tough one to call. Real 50-50. If I'm honest, that's a fight. And I think that what we saw with Ryan Garcia last time out against Tank Davis is that sometimes you can get these super fights and you don't need a title on the line. What I'm saying is, I would like to see Joshua Buatsi boxing. Yeah, I would like to see him boxing an Anthony Yarde. I'd like to see that with no title on the line. I don't think it's about the title. I think that's just a great fight. Sometimes we don't need... If them titles are going to be tied up, let's not wait 2 years. If you were forced
to pick, and I want to pick it up in a second about Garcia and Davis, going off on tangent for a second, but I want to come back to that. But if you had to pick it, Buatsi...
You're not going to let me get away with it, are you?
No, because we need to have an outcome that you can be made accountable for. Nobody to laugh at you.
That's what you do, and I'm most of the times I'm correct.
Please, okay, yeah. Right up there with me.
Who am I going to pick? Joshua Buatsi or Anthony Yarde? Oh, tough fight that. I really can't pick them at the moment, if I'm honest. Who would you pick?
I just got a feeling that Buatsi would come through on points.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling. I mean, Anthony Yarde will whack him and try and whack him. I feel that Buatsi can take good shots, and I think he'd still be there. Yes. I think technically he's a slightly better fighter than Anthony Yarde. Am I miles off?
No, you're solid. You're on the money with that. I just think that if Buatsi gets the momentum going and he's not as active as he has been in recent times, I've always said from the beginning, Buatsi for me was the best prospect worldwide at one stage.
Any merit
worldwide, he's lost a little bit of ground.
Any merit in Buatsi fighting Lyndon Arthur?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Lyndon Arthur's a good fighter, and it gives you a sort of yardstick. Gives you a yardstick to where they're at. Because look, I think Anthony Yarde versus Joshua Buatsi, that's a super fight for British fans. That's a great fight stylistically. That is a great fight.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd love to see a title on the line, but if we don't, let's build it up a little bit. Like Lyndon Arthur.
He's got to be in good fights to do that. And with due respect. Anyway, last observation, and it's just gone out of left field because we mentioned it. Carl Froch talks about Garcia swallowing that fight. What did you know what you're talking about?
I'm glad you asked me it because when I watched it,
Froch said you suck in, you get some breath, and you get on with it.
Listen, I've been hit with those body shots, so I'm looking at it and I go, could he have got up? 100% yes. 100%. He was watching the ref counting the shots. Then he stood up. When you've been hit with them body shots, I'll give you a great example. When Corrales boxed Castillo, and he was getting hit with his body shots, and he come back and he won. He went down 4 times, I think, but you saw him rolling around the floor in pain. Like, when a fighter's in real pain. Garcia's face told me another story.
Listening to this,
Garcia's
I just wanted an answer. Did he swallow?
Yeah, no, but I've got to explain to our great friends out there because they're listening right now.
Are they?
Let me speak anyway.
You want to show some
last week,
because you didn't get a word in last week. Now you want to say loads. Okay.
So my point was, yes, Garcia could have got up.
Okay, all done. Any more?
Yeah.
Right, that's it for this week's episode of Talk Boxing with Simon Jordan and Spencer Oliver. Don't forget, of course, to keep liking and subscribing to the videos. Keep sending questions in for the comment section for the other part of the show that we do. Myself and Spencer will see you next time.